My topic is time of use pricing and detail explain, and let's go to the topic and let's go to the start. Time of use pricing is a pricing strategy used by utility companies to charge customers different rates depending on the time of day that they use their electricity. In a time of use pricing system, rates are typically highest during peak usage hours, which are typically in the late afternoon and early evening, and lowest during off-peak hours, which are typically overnight and during the early morning hours. This system is designed to encourage customers to use electricity during non-peak hours, which can help to reduce overall electricity demand and help to lower costs for both utilities and consumers. Time of use pricing is becoming increasingly popular as more and more utilities move towards smart grid technology and new metering systems that make it easier to track energy use in real time. Time of use pricing is a rate structure used by utility companies to charge customers for electricity based on the time of day and the level of demand on the power grid. It aims to encourage consumers to shift their electricity usage away from peak demand periods and towards off-peak hours, when electricity is typically cheaper and the grid is under less strain. Under time of use pricing, electricity rates vary throughout the day, typically divided into three categories. Peak hours. These are the periods of highest electricity demand during the day, usually occurring in the late afternoon and early evening when people return home from work. Peak rates are typically the highest and reflect the increased cost of supplying electricity during this high demand period. Off-peak hours. These are the times when electricity demand is lower, typically during the night, early morning, and midday when people are less likely to be using large amounts of electricity. Off-peak rates are usually lower as the cost of supplying electricity is lower during these periods. Shoulder hours. These are the transitional periods between peak and off-peak hours, typically in the morning and late evening. Shoulder rates are usually moderate and fall between the peak and off-peak rates. By implementing time of use pricing, utility companies can better manage the demand on the power grid, reduce the need for building additional power plants to meet peak demand, and promote more efficient use of electricity resources. It also allows consumers to make informed choices about their electricity usage and potentially save money by shifting their energy-intensive activities to off-peak hours. It's worth noting that the specific time periods and rate structures for time of use pricing can vary depending on the utility company and the region. Additionally, some utility companies offer time of use pricing plans as optional for consumers, while others may have mandatory participation for certain customer groups. Time of use (TOU) pricing is a rate structure used by utility companies to charge different prices for electricity based on the time of day or day of the week. The aim of TOU pricing is to encourage consumers to shift their electricity usage away from periods of high demand, typically known as peak hours, to times when demand is lower. Under TOU pricing, electricity rates are divided into different time periods, usually three: peak, off-peak, and shoulder. The specific time periods may vary depending on the utility and location. The peak period generally corresponds to times of high electricity demand, such as weekday afternoons or evenings when people are at home and using electrical appliances heavily. Off-peak periods are times of low demand, often occurring during nighttime or weekends. The shoulder period is a transitional time between peak and off-peak hours. During peak hours, electricity rates are higher to reflect the increased strain on the electrical grid. This higher pricing during peak periods incentivizes consumers to reduce or shift their electricity consumption to off-peak hours, where electricity rates are lower. By adjusting their usage patterns, consumers can potentially save money on their electricity bills. TOU pricing encourages more efficient use of electricity and helps utilities manage demand during peak periods, which can reduce strain on the electrical grid and promote a more balanced distribution of electricity generation. It also encourages the use of renewable energy sources since off-peak hours typically coincide with times when renewable energy generation, such as wind and solar, is abundant. It's important to note that the specific TOU pricing structure, rates, and time periods vary by utility company and location. Consumers interested in adopting TOU pricing should contact their utility provider to inquire about the available options and how it might impact their electricity bills. A large portion of the population is away from home during typical work and school hours, and that's why less energy is consumed in most homes throughout much of the day. During the mornings and evenings, however, the demand for energy grows. This is when the majority of us are at home, using our electronic devices, turning on the lights, and adjusting the thermostat for more comfortable temperatures. These times of day when a region's energy load is highest are referred to as peak energy hours. Traditional utility prices involve a set rate per kilowatt-hour, which can fluctuate during the summer and winter. A sliding rate scale, however, is structured according to peak and off-peak times of day. This is called a time of use (TOU) rate plan. Under such a plan, your bill will be determined by how much energy you use and when you use it. The prices and peak times vary based on the season and day of the week. For example, many utility companies consider weekends off-peak. The structure often looks different in the summer or winter months, with more tiers to accommodate the increase in HVAC system use as everyone tries to cool off or stay warm. In Canada, most provinces offer TOU pricing plans only for industrial customers, although in Ontario, TOU rates are mandatory for residential customers across the province. In order to accurately calculate TOU rates, buildings must be equipped with smart meters, which record electricity usage by the hour and communicate this usage to local utilities. Almost every household and business in Ontario is now equipped with a smart meter. Over 60% of Ontario customers can now access their hour-by-hour electricity usage data thanks to the Green Button initiative, which gives them greater control over reducing usage during peak hours. You may be wondering how a time-of-use pricing plan and an awareness of peak hours may benefit you. Well, knowledge is power. If you know the times of day that can save you money, you can concentrate your energy use within those periods and avoid peak hours. Energy is less expensive to produce when fewer homes are using it. Therefore, a TOU pricing plan means your rates align with a daily decrease in electricity generation and delivery costs. You're also helping the greater good this way. When many individuals shift to off-peak hours, it reduces strain on the power grid and leads to improved reliability during peak hours. Using less energy during high demand can also help reduce market prices. Time-of-use pricing is a pricing structure used by utility companies to charge customers different rates for electricity based on the time of day or day of the week. Instead of a fixed rate for electricity consumption, time-of-use pricing aims to reflect the fluctuating costs of generating and delivering electricity throughout the day. Under time-of-use pricing, the cost of electricity varies based on peak, off-peak, and shoulder periods. These periods are typically defined as follows. Peak period: this is the time of day when electricity demand is highest, usually during the late afternoon and early evening when people are using appliances, cooking dinner, and returning home from work. Electricity rates during peak periods are typically the highest to encourage consumers to reduce their usage during these times. Off-peak period: this is the time of day when electricity demand is lowest, typically late at night, early morning, and during the middle of the day when people are at work. Off-peak rates are generally the lowest, as there is excess capacity available in the electrical grid during these times. Shoulder period: shoulder periods are the transitional periods between peak and off-peak times. They are usually in the morning and evening, when electricity demand is moderate. Shoulder rates are generally lower than peak rates but higher than off-peak rates. The purpose of time-of-use pricing is to incentivize customers to shift their electricity usage away from peak periods to off-peak or shoulder periods. By doing so, customers can take advantage of lower electricity rates and reduce strain on the electrical grid during times of high demand. This can lead to more efficient energy consumption and a more stable and cost-effective electricity supply. It's worth noting that the specific time periods and pricing rates may vary depending on the utility company and region. Additionally, not all customers may be on time-of-use pricing plans, as it is often optional and may be more common for commercial and industrial customers rather than residential customers. Power plants can be enormous contributors to pollution, especially during peak hours. That's because when electricity demand peaks, utility providers must use additional power plants to keep up. Throughout the day, baseload plants provide a steady, constant flow of power, which in Canada is mostly generated by nuclear plants and reservoir hydro plants. When baseload plants alone don't provide enough power, we turn to peaker plants which can ramp up and down as demand changes. In many provinces though, peaker plants are run on combustible fuels like natural gas or coal, which emit greenhouse gases. If you shift your energy use to off-peak, reduce the workload, as well as the need for more plants to be built so that utility companies can keep up with demand. Improve your insulation and weather stripping. Seal up air leaks. Replace old, Inefficient appliances with Energy Star rated. Install energy-efficient light bulbs and low-flow water fixtures. Adjust the temperature when you leave, warmer in the summer and cooler in the winter. Cover your windows with curtains or an awning on the outside. Install low emissivity windows or apply energy-efficient window treatments. Hang your clothes to dry in nice weather. Switch to a cold water detergent and wash all of your clothes in cold water. Get timers for HVAC and lighting. Time of use pricing is a billing system used by utility companies to charge customers different rates for electricity consumption based on the time of day. Instead of a fixed rate for electricity, time of use pricing encourages consumers to shift their energy usage to off-peak hours when demand and costs are lower. Under time of use pricing, the day is divided into different time periods, typically categorized as peak, off-peak, and sometimes shoulder periods. The rates charged during these periods can vary significantly. Peak periods usually occur during times of high electricity demand, such as weekday evenings when people return home from work and use appliances and electronics extensively. Off-peak periods, on the other hand, are times of low electricity demand, often late at night or early in the morning. Shoulder periods are transitional periods between peak and off-peak. The main goal of time of use pricing is to incentivize consumers to reduce their electricity usage during peak hours and shift it to off-peak periods. By doing so, it helps utilities manage electricity demand more efficiently, avoid overloading the grid, and potentially reduce the need for building new power plants. It can also promote energy conservation and the use of renewable energy sources. Customers who participate in time-of-use pricing programs may have different rate structures depending on their utility provider and location. Typically, peak rates are higher than off-peak rates to encourage customers to limit their electricity usage during high-demand periods. Some utilities also offer lower rates during shoulder periods to further incentivize energy shifting. To take advantage of time-of-use pricing, customers need to be aware of their consumption patterns and adjust their electricity usage accordingly. This might involve tasks such as running major appliances or charging electric vehicles during off-peak hours and minimizing usage during peak periods. It's important to note that time-of-use pricing is not universally implemented and its availability may vary depending on your location and utility provider. If you are interested in time-of-use pricing, it's best to contact your local utility company to inquire about the availability and details of such programs in your area. Time of use, TOU. Pricing is a billing structure that varies the cost of electricity based on the time of day or day of the week. It aims to reflect the changing costs of generating and delivering electricity throughout the day, as well as encourage consumers to shift their electricity usage to off-peak hours. TOU pricing typically involves higher rates during peak demand periods and lower rates during off-peak periods. The main idea behind TOU pricing is to incentivize consumers to use electricity when demand is lower and the cost of production is cheaper. This approach helps balance the electricity grid, reduce the need for additional power plants, and promote energy efficiency. Under TOU pricing, electricity rates are divided into different time periods or tiers. These periods are typically categorized as peak, off-peak, and sometimes intermediate or shoulder periods. The specific time periods and rates can vary depending on the utility company and region. During peak periods, which are typically when electricity demand is highest, for example, early evenings, the rates are higher to discourage heavy usage. Off-peak periods, such as late at night or early morning, have lower rates to encourage electricity consumption during those times. Intermediate or shoulder periods fall between peak and off-peak times and often have rates lower than peak periods but higher than off-peak periods. TOU pricing allows consumers to adjust their electricity usage to take advantage of lower rates during off-peak hours. For example, they can run energy-intensive appliances like dishwashers, washing machines, or electric vehicle chargers during off-peak times to reduce their electricity costs. It's worth noting that TOU pricing is not uniformly implemented worldwide. Its availability, structure, and rate periods can vary between different regions, utility companies, and regulatory frameworks. If you have specific questions or would like more information about TOU pricing in a particular context, please provide additional details. If you are able to manage your energy habits, one of our time-of-use plans may be the best fit for your home. Rates on a TOU plan are based on the time of day and the season. TOU plans can help you manage your energy costs. By taking advantage of lower rates during off-peak and super off-peak periods, You can avoid higher weekday rates when energy resources are in demand. Time of use, TOU. Pricing is a rate structure used by utility companies to vary electricity prices based on the time of day and the demand for electricity during different periods. Instead of charging a flat rate for electricity throughout the day, TOU pricing encourages consumers to shift their electricity usage to off-peak hours when demand is lower, thereby reducing strain on the grid and potentially lowering overall energy costs. Under TOU pricing, the day is divided into different time periods, typically categorized as peak, off-peak, and sometimes shoulder periods. The specific time periods and rates may vary depending on the utility and location. Peak periods typically occur during times of high electricity demand, such as weekday evenings when people return home from work and use appliances and electronics. Off-peak periods usually coincide with times of lower demand, such as overnight or weekends. Shoulder periods are transitional periods between peak and off-peak hours. During peak periods, electricity rates are higher, reflecting the increased strain on the grid and the higher cost of generating electricity at times of high demand. Off-peak periods, on the other hand, offer lower rates as there is excess capacity available. By adjusting their electricity consumption patterns and shifting energy-intensive activities to off-peak hours, consumers can potentially save money on their electricity bills. TOU pricing is often used to incentivize the adoption of energy-saving practices and the use of clean energy technologies. It encourages consumers to be more mindful of their energy usage and consider scheduling activities such as laundry, dishwashing, or charging electric vehicles during off-peak hours. It also supports the integration of renewable energy sources by aligning electricity consumption with periods when renewable generation is abundant, such as during the day for solar power. It's worth noting that not all utility companies offer TOU pricing, and its availability may vary by region. Additionally, the effectiveness of TOU pricing depends on individual consumption patterns, lifestyle, and the flexibility to shift electricity usage to off-peak periods. Consumers should carefully evaluate their energy needs and habits to determine if TOU pricing is a suitable option for them. Time of use, TOU. Pricing is a billing structure used by utility companies to charge different rates for electricity consumption based on the time of day and the day of the week. TOU pricing aims to encourage consumers to shift their electricity usage to off-peak hours when demand is lower and electricity is generally cheaper to produce. Under TOU pricing, utility companies divide the day into different time blocks, typically categorized as peak, off-peak, and sometimes intermediate. The specific time blocks and their corresponding rates can vary depending on the utility company and the region. During peak hours, when electricity demand is highest, the rates are typically the highest. Off-peak hours, when electricity demand is lower, often have lower rates, while intermediate hours may have rates between peak and off-peak. The purpose of TOU pricing is to incentivize consumers to use electricity during off-peak hours, which can help balance the demand on the electrical grid and reduce the need for additional power generation capacity. By shifting energy-intensive activities, such as running appliances, charging electric vehicles, or operating industrial machinery, to off-peak hours, consumers can potentially reduce their electricity bills. TOU pricing provides an opportunity for consumers to save money by being mindful of their energy usage patterns and adjusting their consumption accordingly. However, it may require some lifestyle adjustments and planning to take advantage of the lower-cost off-peak periods. Some utility companies offer tools and technologies that help consumers track their energy usage in real time, making it easier to manage electricity consumption and maximize cost savings. It's important to note that TOU pricing may not be available in all regions, and the specific details and rates can vary. Consumers interested in TOU pricing should check with their local utility company to see if such a pricing structure is offered and to understand the specific rates and time blocks applicable to their area. Time of use, TOU. Pricing is a billing system used by utility companies to charge customers different rates for electricity based on the time of day and the demand on the electrical grid. Under TOU pricing, electricity, the time of day, typically divided into peak, off-peak, and sometimes shoulder periods. The purpose of TOU pricing is to encourage consumers to shift their electricity usage away from peak demand periods and towards off-peak periods when the cost of generating and distributing electricity is lower. By offering lower rates during off-peak periods, TOU pricing aims to incentivize customers to use electricity when the demand is lower, which can help reduce strain on the grid and increase overall energy efficiency. The specific timing and rates for TOU pricing vary depending on the utility company and the region. Typically, peak periods are during the times of highest demand, such as weekday evenings when people return home from work and use electricity for cooking, lighting, and other activities. Off-peak periods often occur overnight or during weekends when the demand for electricity is lower. TOU pricing is often implemented using smart meters, which record the electricity consumption at different times of the day. This allows the utility company to accurately measure and bill customers based on their usage during specific time periods. TOU pricing can benefit customers who are able to shift their electricity usage to off-peak periods, as they can take advantage of lower rates and potentially reduce their overall energy costs. However, it may require changes in behavior and lifestyle, such as running appliances or charging electric vehicles during off-peak hours. It's important to note that TOU pricing may not be available in all areas or for all types of customers. The availability and details of TOU pricing can vary depending on the regulations and policies of the local utility company or energy provider. If you are interested in TOU pricing, it is best to contact your utility company directly to inquire about the specific options and rates available in your area. Time of use. TOU pricing is a billing structure used by utilities to charge customers different rates for electricity based on the time of day and the day of the week. Instead of a flat rate for electricity consumption, TOU pricing encourages consumers to shift their electricity usage to off-peak hours when demand is lower, thus helping to balance the load on the electrical grid. Under TOU pricing, electricity rates are typically divided into three categories: peak, off-peak, and shoulder. Peak hours are the times when electricity demand is highest, usually occurring during the day when businesses are operational and people are using appliances and devices. Off-peak hours are periods of lower demand, often occurring at night or early morning. Shoulder hours are intermediate periods between peak and off-peak. The specific time periods designated for each rate category can vary depending on the utility and the region. Some utilities may also have different rate structures for different seasons, such as summer and winter. The purpose of TOU pricing is to incentivize consumers to shift their electricity usage away from peak hours, which can help reduce strain on the grid and prevent the need for additional power generation capacity. By offering lower rates during off-peak hours, consumers can save money if they adjust their energy consumption habits accordingly. TOU pricing is often implemented alongside smart meter technology, which allows utilities to track and record electricity usage in real time. Smart meters enable accurate measurement of consumption during different time periods, making it possible to bill customers based on their actual usage during peak, off-peak, and shoulder hours. It's important to note that TOU pricing may not be available in all areas, as it depends on the policies and infrastructure of the local utility. Additionally, the effectiveness and cost savings of TOU pricing can vary depending on individual consumption patterns and the specific rates offered by the utility. Time of use. TOU pricing is a billing structure used by utility companies to charge different rates for electricity consumption based on the time of day. Instead of a fixed rate, TOU pricing encourages consumers to shift their electricity usage to off-peak hours when the demand on the electrical grid is lower. Under TOU pricing, electricity rates are typically divided into three periods: peak, off-peak, and shoulder. These periods may vary depending on the specific utility and region, but typically peak hours occur during times of high demand, such as weekday evenings when people are at home and using appliances and lighting. Off-peak hours are typically overnight or during the day when demand is lower, and shoulder hours fall between peak and off-peak periods. The purpose of TOU pricing is to incentivize consumers to shift their electricity usage to off-peak hours, which can help balance the demand on the electrical grid and reduce the need for additional power generation capacity. By charging higher rates during peak hours and lower rates during off-peak hours, TOU pricing encourages consumers to schedule energy-intensive activities like running appliances, charging electric vehicles, or heating and cooling their homes to times when electricity is cheaper. TOU pricing can benefit both consumers and utility companies. Consumers who can shift their energy usage to off-peak hours can take advantage of lower rates and potentially save money on their electricity bills. Utility companies, on the other hand, can reduce strain on the grid during peak periods and optimize their energy generation and distribution systems. It's important to note that the specific details of TOU pricing, including the rate structure and the periods of peak, off-peak, and shoulder hours, can vary between different utility companies and regions. Consumers should consult with their utility provider or check their electricity bill to understand the specific TOU pricing structure and the corresponding rates in their area. Time of use, TOU, pricing is a billing structure used by utility companies to charge customers different rates for electricity based on the time of day or day of the week. The purpose of TOU pricing is to encourage customers to shift their electricity usage away from peak demand periods when electricity is more expensive to produce, towards off-peak periods when electricity costs are lower. Under TOU pricing, the day is typically divided into different time blocks, such as peak, off-peak, and sometimes shoulder periods. The rates for each time block vary, with peak periods having the highest rates, off-peak periods having the lowest rates, and shoulder periods falling somewhere in between. The specific timing and rates for each block can vary depending on the utility company and the region. By implementing TOU pricing, utilities aim to incentivize customers to reduce their electricity consumption during peak periods. This helps to balance the demand for electricity throughout the day, reduces strain on the power grid, and can potentially lead to cost savings for both the utility company and the consumer. TOU pricing can be particularly beneficial for customers who can shift their electricity usage to off-peak periods, such as running appliances, charging electric vehicles, or performing energy-intensive tasks during times when electricity rates are lower. However, it may not be as advantageous for customers who are unable to adjust their electricity usage or who have a significant portion of their consumption during peak periods. It's important to note that TOU pricing is a specific billing structure implemented by utility companies and may not be available in all areas. The availability and details of TOU pricing can vary depending on your location and the policies of your local utility company. If you are interested in exploring TOU pricing or understanding the specific rates and timing in your area, it is recommended to contact your utility company for more information. Time of use, TOU. Pricing is a billing system used by utilities to charge customers different rates for electricity consumption based on the time of day and the day of the week. The purpose of TOU pricing is to encourage customers to shift their electricity usage away from peak demand periods, thus reducing strain on the electrical grid and promoting more efficient use of electricity. Under a TOU pricing structure, electricity rates are divided into different time periods, typically 3 or more, with varying rates for each period. These periods are usually defined as off-peak, mid-peak, and on-peak, although the specific timeframes may vary depending on the utility and location. The off-peak period generally occurs during times of low electricity demand, such as late at night or early morning, and the rates during this period are typically the lowest. The mid-peak period usually encompasses the daytime hours when electricity demand is moderate, and the rates are somewhat higher than off-peak rates. The on-peak period corresponds to the times of highest electricity demand, often in the late afternoon or early evening, and the rates during this period are the highest. By providing different price signals throughout the day, TOU pricing aims to incentivize customers to shift their electricity usage to off-peak or mid-peak periods when rates are lower. This can be done by performing energy-intensive tasks, such as running appliances or charging electric vehicles, during these times. Conversely, customers are encouraged to reduce or avoid electricity consumption during on-peak periods to avoid higher costs. TOU pricing can benefit both the utility and the customer. For utilities, it helps manage peak demand more effectively, reducing the need for expensive infrastructure investments and ensuring grid stability. Customers who can shift their usage to lower-priced periods can potentially save money on their electricity bills. However, it may require a change in behavior and lifestyle to periods. It's worth noting that TOU pricing structures and rates can vary depending on the utility, geographical location, and local regulations. Therefore, specific details and rate structures should be obtained from the relevant utility provider or regulatory agency to get accurate information about TOU pricing in a particular area. Time of use, TOU. Pricing is a billing method used by utility companies to charge customers different rates for electricity based on the time of day or the day of the week. The purpose of TOU pricing is to incentivize customers to shift their electricity usage away from peak demand periods, reducing strain on the electrical grid and promoting energy efficiency. Under TOU pricing, electricity rates are divided into different time periods, typically consisting of peak, off-peak, and sometimes intermediate periods. The rates for each period are set based on the expected level of electricity demand during that time. Peak periods: these are the times of highest electricity demand, usually occurring during the day when people are at work or school and using electrical appliances and equipment. Peak periods typically last for a few hours in the morning and a few hours in the evening. Off-peak periods: these are the times of lowest electricity demand, typically occurring late at night or early in the morning when most people are asleep. Off-peak periods often extend throughout the night and sometimes include weekends and holidays. Intermediate periods: in some TOU pricing structures, there may be an additional rate category called intermediate or shoulder periods. These periods fall between peak and off-peak hours and have rates that are lower than peak rates but higher than off-peak rates. The specific timing and duration of each period can vary depending on the utility company and the region. The rates for each period are set to reflect the cost of supplying electricity during those times. Typically, peak periods have the highest rates, followed by intermediate periods, while off-peak periods have the lowest rates. Customers on TOU pricing plans are encouraged to shift their electricity usage to off-peak periods when rates are lower. This can be done by running major appliances, such as washing machines, dishwashers, and pool pumps, during off-peak hours or by charging electric vehicles overnight. Some customers may also choose to install smart home technologies that can automatically adjust electricity usage based on TOU pricing signals. TOU pricing aims to reduce peak demand, which can help utilities manage their electricity generation and distribution more efficiently. It also encourages customers to be more aware of their electricity usage patterns and make more conscious decisions about when and how they consume electricity. It's important to note that TOU pricing structures and rates can vary widely depending on the utility company, location, and local regulations. Therefore, it's recommended to check with your specific utility provider to understand the details of their TOU pricing plans. Time of use pricing is a billing structure used by utility companies to charge different rates for electricity based on the time of day or the season. Instead of a flat rate for electricity consumption, time of use pricing encourages customers to shift their usage to off-peak periods when the demand for electricity is lower. Under time of use pricing, the day is typically divided into different time periods, such as peak, off-peak, and shoulder. The peak period is when the demand for electricity is highest, usually during the daytime when people are using appliances, air conditioning, and other electrical devices. Off-peak periods are times of lower demand, often occurring overnight or during weekends and holidays when electricity usage is reduced. Shoulder periods are intermediate periods with moderate demand. The rates for electricity during each time period are set by the utility company. Typically, the rates are higher during peak periods and lower during off-peak periods. The idea behind time of use pricing is to incentivize customers to shift their electricity usage to off-peak times when the cost of electricity is lower. By adjusting their usage patterns, customers can potentially lower their electricity bills. For example, they may choose to run their major appliances, such as washing machines and dishwashers, during off-peak hours. They may also reduce electricity consumption during peak hours by adjusting thermostat settings, using energy-efficient appliances, or turning off unnecessary lights and electronics. Time of use pricing can be beneficial for both consumers and utility companies. Consumers have the opportunity to save money by taking advantage of lower rates during off-peak hours. Utility companies, on the other hand, can better manage their electricity generation and distribution by incentivizing customers to reduce peak demand, which can help to balance the load on the grid and potentially avoid the need for additional power plants. It's important to note that the specific time periods and rates for time of use pricing can vary depending on the utility company and region. Some areas may also offer different time of use pricing options, such as seasonal rates that vary throughout the year. If you are interested in time of use pricing, it's best to check with your local utility company to understand the specific details and options available in your area. Time of use, TOU, pricing is a billing structure used by utility companies to charge different rates for electricity consumption based on the time of day and day of the week. The objective of TOU pricing is to encourage consumers to shift their electricity usage away from peak demand periods, thus reducing strain on the power grid and promoting more efficient energy use. Under TOU pricing, electricity rates are divided into different time periods, typically categorized as peak, off-peak, and shoulder periods. The specific time periods and rates can vary depending on the utility company and region. During peak periods when electricity demand is high, the rates are typically the highest. Off-peak periods, on the other hand, have lower rates as demand is lower during those times. Shoulder periods fall between peak and off-peak periods, and the rates are usually intermediate. The exact timing and duration of these periods depend on the utility company's implementation and can vary. Typically, peak periods occur during the day when demand is highest, often in the late afternoon or early evening when people return home from work or school. Off-peak periods are usually late at night or early in the morning when electricity demand is lower. TOU pricing aims to incentivize consumers to shift their electricity usage to off-peak periods when rates are lower. This can be done by performing energy-intensive tasks, such as running appliances or charging electric vehicles, during off-peak hours. By adjusting their electricity usage patterns, consumers can potentially reduce their energy bills. TOU pricing can also benefit the power grid by encouraging a more balanced distribution of electricity demand throughout the day. This can help utilities avoid costly infrastructure investments to meet peak demand and improve overall grid efficiency. It's important to note that TOU pricing is not universally implemented and may not be available in all areas. The availability and specific details of TOU pricing are determined by individual utility companies and their regulatory frameworks. If you're interested in TOU pricing, it's best to contact your local utility provider to inquire about its availability and how it works in your area. Time of use. TOU pricing is a billing system used by utility companies to charge customers different rates for electricity based on the time of day and the level of demand on the grid. Under TOU pricing, the cost of electricity varies throughout the day, with higher prices during peak demand periods and lower prices during off-peak periods. The main goal of TOU pricing is to encourage customers to shift their electricity usage away from peak demand periods when the cost of generating and delivering electricity is higher. By incentivizing customers to use electricity during off-peak hours, TOU pricing helps to balance the load on the power grid, reduce strain during peak times, and potentially avoid the need for building additional power plants. Typically, TOU pricing involves dividing the day into different time periods, such as peak, off-peak, and sometimes shoulder periods. The specific time periods and rates can vary depending on the utility company and the region. During peak periods, which are usually during the day when demand is highest, electricity rates are higher. Off-peak periods, such as late at night or early in the morning, have lower rates. Shoulder periods are intermediate periods with rates that fall between peak and off-peak rates. TOU pricing can be advantageous for customers who can shift their electricity usage to off-peak hours. For example, running appliances, charging electric vehicles, or doing laundry during off-peak times can result in lower electricity bills. However, customers who are unable to adjust their electricity usage patterns or rely heavily on electricity during peak periods may experience higher costs under TOU pricing. It's important to note that the availability of TOU pricing and the specific rate structure can vary depending on the utility company, country, and region. Some areas have implemented mandatory TOU pricing for certain customer groups, while others offer it as an optional choice. It's recommended to check with your local utility provider or electricity supplier for detailed information on TOU pricing options and rates in your area. There are several benefits to time-of-use pricing. First, it can help to reduce the strain on the power grid during peak usage time, prevent blackouts and other power outages. Second, it can help to reduce the overall cost of electricity for consumers by encouraging them to shift their usage to off-peak hours when rates are lower. This can be especially beneficial for households and businesses that use a lot of electricity, such as those with large appliances or high-tech equipment. However, there are also some potential drawbacks to time-of-use pricing. One concern is that it may be unfair to low-income households who cannot shift their usage to off-peak hours, as they may have less flexibility in their schedules or less access to energy-efficient appliances. Additionally, some customers may find the variable rates confusing or difficult to understand, which could lead to frustration and dissatisfaction with their utility company. Overall, time-of-use pricing is a useful tool for managing electricity demand and reducing costs for both utilities and consumers. However, it is important for utilities to ensure that the system is fair and transparent for all customers, and to provide education and support to help customers understand and optimize their energy usage. Time-of-use pricing is a billing system used by utility companies to charge customers different rates for electricity based on the time of day or the season. Instead of a fixed rate for electricity usage, time-of-use pricing encourages customers to shift their electricity consumption to off-peak hours when the demand is lower. Under time-of-use pricing, the cost of electricity is divided into different time periods, typically categorized as peak, off-peak, and shoulder. Peak hours are typically during the day when the demand for electricity is highest, while off-peak hours are usually at night or early morning when the demand is lower. Shoulder hours are the transition periods between peak and off-peak. The rates for each time period can vary significantly, with peak hours having the highest rates and off-peak hours having the lowest rates. By charging higher rates during peak hours, time-of-use pricing aims to incentivize consumers to shift their electricity usage to off-peak hours, which can help balance the overall electricity demand and reduce the need for additional power generation capacity. The specific time periods and rate structures may vary depending on the utility company and the region. Some utility companies offer different time-of-use plans, allowing customers to choose the plan that best suits their needs and lifestyle. Customers who can adjust their electricity usage to off-peak hours, such as by running appliances, charging electric vehicles, or doing laundry during those times, can potentially save money on their electricity bills. Time-of-use pricing can also promote energy conservation and the use of renewable energy sources. By encouraging customers to shift their usage to off-peak hours, it helps maximize the utilization of renewable energy resources, such as solar power, which is typically more abundant during daylight hours. It's important for customers to understand the specific time periods and rates associated with their time-of-use pricing plan to effectively manage their electricity consumption and take advantage of potential cost savings. Utility companies often provide tools and resources to help customers monitor and manage their electricity usage based on the time-of-use pricing structure. Furthermore, implementing time-of-use pricing requires a certain level of technological infrastructure, such as smart meters and data analytics capabilities. This may result in additional costs for utilities and could be a barrier to implementation for some companies. Additionally, while time-of-use pricing can reduce overall peak demand, it does not address the underlying issue of insufficient energy supply during peak usage times, which may require additional investment in infrastructure and renewable energy sources. In summary, time-of-use pricing can provide significant benefits for both utilities and consumers, but it is important to consider potential drawbacks and to carefully implement and communicate the system to ensure fairness and transparency. It is important for governments and utilities to work together to ensure that time-of-use pricing is implemented in a way that encourages energy conservation and supports the transition to a more sustainable energy system. This may involve providing incentives for consumers to shift their usage patterns, investing in renewable energy sources, and ensuring that vulnerable consumers are protected from price shocks. Furthermore, the success of time-of-use pricing depends on effective communication and education. Consumers must fully understand the system and its benefits, and have access to tools and resources to help them manage their energy usage. This may involve utilizing mobile apps and other technologies to provide real-time usage data and alerts, as well as targeted education and outreach campaigns. Overall, time-of-use pricing has the potential to transform the energy sector by incentivizing energy conservation and supporting the transition to renewable energy sources. However, it is important to approach the implementation of this system carefully and considerately in order to ensure that it benefits all stakeholders and supports a sustainable energy future. Governments and utilities should collaborate to design a comprehensive framework that includes incentives, education, and protections for vulnerable consumers. The emphasis should be on creating a fair and transparent system that encourages consumers to use energy during off-peak hours to reduce their bills and support the integration of renewable energy sources into the grid. To ensure consumers are informed about the time-of-use pricing system, utilities should launch targeted communication campaigns, including social media marketing, emails, and other digital marketing platforms. Utility providers should also create energy consumption trackers that provide information on how much energy is used, identify when energy was consumed, and how much it costs. Education should also be focused on vulnerable customers who could be disproportionately affected by changes in pricing structures. For example, a low-income household may not be able to make changes to their energy use patterns to benefit from the off-peak pricing due to inflexible work hours. Therefore, utility companies should develop an assistance program that helps vulnerable populations to modify their energy use and access the benefits of time-of-use pricing. Finally, governments should provide a regulatory framework that encourages investment in renewable energy sources. The system should be designed to encourage investment in renewable energy, which provides a more reliable source of energy due to less dependence on weather patterns, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and lower energy costs over time. The framework should also discourage investment in fossil fuels. In conclusion, time-of-use pricing is an essential tool that helps consumers and society at large to use energy in a more intelligent way. The successful implementation of this system requires cooperation between governments, utility providers, and consumers, with an emphasis on education, assistance, and regulatory support. Time-of-use pricing is a billing system in which the cost of electricity varies depending on the time of day and the level of demand on the electrical grid. The aim of time-of-use pricing is to encourage consumers to shift their electricity usage away from peak demand periods when electricity is more expensive and towards off-peak hours when it is cheaper. Under time-of-use pricing, the day is divided into different time periods, typically 3: peak, off-peak, and shoulder. Peak periods are when electricity demand is highest, usually during the day when people are using appliances and businesses are operating. Off-peak periods are when demand is lowest, often during the night. Shoulder periods fall between peak and off-peak hours and have moderate demand. The electricity rates are set higher during peak periods and lower during off-peak hours to reflect the actual cost of generating and distributing electricity at different times. This pricing structure encourages consumers to reduce or shift their electricity usage to off-peak hours, helping to balance the demand on the electrical grid and potentially reduce the need for additional power generation capacity. Time-of-use pricing can provide several benefits. It can incentivize consumers to shift their energy usage to times when there is excess capacity, reducing strain on the grid during peak periods. It can also promote energy conservation and efficiency by encouraging consumers to use electricity more efficiently or during off-peak hours when renewable energy sources may be more abundant. The specific time periods and rates for time-of-use pricing can vary depending on the region, utility company, and the specific tariff structure in place. Some utility companies may offer different rates for different seasons or days of the week, while others may have fixed time periods throughout the year. It is best to check with your local utility provider to understand the specific time-of-use pricing structure in your area. By designing a comprehensive framework for time-of-use pricing that includes these elements, we can support the integration of renewable energy sources into the grid, reduce energy costs for consumers, and ultimately, move towards a more sustainable energy future. Time-of-use (TOU) pricing is a method of charging for electricity that varies depending on the time of day and the season. These rates are set by the utility company and aim to reduce peak demand for electricity by incentivizing customers to shift their usage to off-peak hours when electricity is cheaper. Typically, TOU rates have 3 pricing tiers: off-peak, mid-peak, and on-peak. Cheapest and usually occur at night or early morning. Mid-peak rates occur during the day and are slightly more expensive, while on-peak rates are the most expensive and occur during peak demand hours such as evenings and hot summer afternoons. By encouraging customers to use electricity during off-peak hours, TOU pricing helps to balance the demand for electricity and reduce strain on the electrical grid. TOU pricing can also be beneficial for customers who are able to shift their usage to off-peak hours, as they can take advantage of the lower rates and potentially lower their electricity bills. However, some customers may find it difficult to shift their usage, especially if they have certain appliances or devices that need to be used during peak hours. In addition, customers may also experience bill shock if they are not aware of the pricing tiers and accidentally use electricity during on-peak hours, resulting in a higher bill than expected. Overall, TOU pricing is a complex system that requires careful consideration and education for both utility companies and customers. By using TOU pricing, electricity can be used more efficiently, which can lead to a more reliable and cost-effective electrical grid. Time of use, TOU. Pricing is a billing structure used by utility companies to charge different rates for electricity consumption based on the time of day and the level of demand on the electrical grid. The objective of TOU pricing is to incentivize consumers to shift their electricity usage to periods of lower demand, which helps balance the load on the grid and can reduce the need for additional power generation. Under TOU pricing, electricity rates are divided into different time periods, typically 3 or more, known as peak, off-peak, and shoulder periods. These periods may vary depending on the utility and the region. The rates charged during each period are designed to reflect the cost of generating and delivering electricity during that time. Peak periods usually occur during times of high demand, such as weekday evenings when people return home from work and engage in activities that consume more electricity. The rates during peak periods tend to be higher to encourage consumers to reduce their usage or shift it to other times. Off-peak periods are times of low demand, typically late at night or early morning when most people are not consuming much electricity. The rates during these periods are generally lower, making it more cost-effective to use electricity during those hours. Shoulder periods are transitional periods between peak and off-peak periods, usually occurring in the morning and evening. The rates during shoulder periods are typically lower than during peak periods but higher than off-peak rates. TOU pricing can vary significantly based on the utility provider, location, and specific plan. Some TOU plans may have fixed rates for each period, while others may have variable rates that change based on the actual demand and market conditions. By adopting TOU pricing, consumers have the opportunity to save money by adjusting their electricity usage patterns to align with off-peak or lower-priced periods. This can be done by running appliances like dishwashers, washing machines, or electric vehicle charging during off-peak hours. TOU pricing encourages energy conservation, helps manage peak demand on the grid, and promotes the use of renewable energy sources, as the off-peak periods often coincide with periods of high renewable energy generation, such as when solar or wind resources are abundant. It's important to note that TOU pricing is not universally implemented and availability may vary based on your location and utility provider. If you are interested in TOU pricing or want to know more about specific plans available in your area, it's recommended to contact your local utility company for detailed information. However, it is important for utility companies to design fair and transparent pricing structures that take into account the needs and constraints of different customers. Education campaigns can also be helpful to ensure that customers understand the pricing tiers and are able to adjust their usage accordingly. With proper planning and communication, TOU pricing can be a win-win solution for both utility companies and. Thank you for watching the video and subscribe the channel.